This is John Kranz with Consim Press, and this video tutorial number 6 is going to focus on aircraft encounters. And actually we're going to just continue on from where we left off after completing video tutorial number 5, in which we successfully sank a large freighter that was unescorted. And what we have here is actually our U-boat display and how it looks after that large freighter was sunk. And what was not mentioned after the sinking was, well, that encounter ends at that point. Once the sinking occurs, the encounter officially ends. So what happens when you finish the encounter is you would move on to the next travel box, which I will do here in a moment, but first you have an opportunity when an engagement ends to go ahead and reload, do any necessary reloading. So I did expend 3 torpedoes from my 4 tubes, and I've decided I'm going to opt to go ahead and add steams again from my 4 reload capacity. I could also added electrics if I felt the need to do that, but we're going to go with steam again. So we've got our U-boat properly reset for the next possible engagement, and with that encounter having ended, we now move on to the next travel box for the Atlantic. So I don't know what I'm going to be rolling now, but basically what we're going to do is we're automatically going to assume that we roll an encounter with aircraft. So what I'll do here is I'll just quickly scroll down just to show you what it would look like on this chart if we were following the rules as written. And that would simply be coming back for the Atlantic and rolling 2d6, which I'll do now. And I rolled an 8. Well, obviously, not only did I not have an aircraft encounter occur, you'll notice that for the Atlantic, there is not even an option for an aircraft encounter. But you know what? You might know there's an exception to that just from the last video we did, and that is, for example, just against an unescorted ship, if you don't sink it and want to try additional combat rounds, sure, you would possibly trigger an aircraft encounter that way. So let's not say it's impossible for aircraft encounters not to happen in the Atlantic. That is not the case at all. Far from it. So, and especially since we have Bay of Biscay to roll through, etc. And you can see aircraft is positioned there as well, just in the transit boxes. So you might obviously have an aircraft encounter take place. And let's assume that's what happened. Let's assume, obviously it's not going to happen just based on the Atlantic scenario we just did. Let's just pretend we've rolled an aircraft result on this encounter chart. And let's now see how we would go ahead and complete that procedure. So what we're going to do here is we're going to move forward to the, let me get to the right chart here. Excuse me for 1 second, and that is chart 1 for aircraft encounters. So we rolled an aircraft encounter, but now we basically are crash diving. It's automatic. So one thing that's important to point out is there are rules mentioned talking about exceeding test depth to try to have a favorable die roll modifier when you're trying to escape escort detection. Exceeding test depth has nothing to do with aircraft encounters. It is not something you would decide. The U-boat is automatically trying to crash dive, basically, as soon as this aircraft shows up. So what we have to do is we have to see if there's any modifiers to apply before we roll 2d6 and see what the result is on this table. So we can see here there's modifiers for the time of year. When the patrol is taking place, it's 1940. There's no modifiers. It's not a special patrol assignment where we're in that specific box to carry out the special mission, so there's no modifier there. We've got no damage to our dive planes. We don't have a green crew, nor do we have an elite crew. We're using a Type 7C, so we have absolutely no modifiers at all taking place here based on our U-boat that we're going to roll for. So let's go ahead and roll 2d6, and let's just see, and I don't know what's going to happen here. I'll just roll 2d6s to see what the dice say. So I came up with a 7. So 6 or more, I rolled a 7. Successful crash dive means no air attack. And what that would mean is we would go back to our U-boat display, and that would end the encounter for that travel box, and you would proceed to the next travel box. And so let's just pretend we just let's pretend actually that we rolled poorly on the chart. So let's say, for example, we rolled between a 2 and a 5 on that 2d6. So it says here there's going to be one aircraft, there's going to be one attack on the E3 table, and you're automatically going to take a crew injury, regardless of what happens. Even if there's, possibly no damage whatsoever, you're going to take an additional crew injury and have to roll for that above and beyond anything that happens. So let's go ahead and roll now on the E3 chart and conduct the one attack. So I'm going to skip over to the E3 chart, which is right here. E3 escort air attack chart. I'll make it a little bit bigger here so you can see it. And what we need to do is we've got die roll modifiers here again. To be honest, there is again actually going to be just one modifier here, and that is we have to add 2 to the dice because it is an air attack. See, notice this chart talks about also escort attacks, and in this case it's an air attack, and getting a hit on an air attack is not a good thing. So it's increasing the odds you're going to take some damage to the U-boat. Matter of fact, it's +2 to the die roll of a 2d6. So let's go ahead and roll that. I rolled a 7 plus 2 is 9, so we took 3 hits. Now for these 3 hits, I want to go ahead and just sort of track that real quickly. So I'm going to go over to the combat mat here. And we've got, again, we're under an air attack, and I've got 3 incoming hits. So now this is where the incoming hits marker could be used. If I was using the optional rule for variable aircraft quality, I would also be finding out if it's, if it's a veteran air quality, it'd be an additional hit over above what I rolled. It'd be a 4 instead of 3 hits. So let's assume that we're not using the optional rule. So I just want to show you this as a for instance that if you are following the optional variable aircraft rule, we have markers for that. And if I show you quickly, again, the printed rules, we can go to that section. Optional rules. So let me just scroll down here for a moment to the optional rules section. So here, variable aircraft quality is section 14.7. You can see here based on the, it's 1940, you have to roll 1d6, and if you rolled a 6, you would get that veteran show up, which would not be a good thing. So again, this is adds a little bit of time to play, but I recommend this. I recommend adding this optional rule. Just adds additional flavor and randomness to the game. A little more to the chaos theory, which I always enjoy in gaming. So we'll go back. We've got 3 hits we've got to now resolve incoming against the U-boat. Now, one thing I do want to mention now, although we'll resolve the hits now, is I just want to go back for a moment. And combat is considered simultaneous when you're undergoing an air attack. So at the same time you just resolve the air attack, we also are going to resolve the flak attack against the aircraft. It's automatic. There's some modifiers here, but none apply in my case. So we're just going to roll 2d6 to see what happens. So I rolled an 8. So an 8, which is 6 or more, is a miss. So obviously that is not the result we were hoping for. That means we'll have to roll for an additional round of combat. And we'll have to deal with that after this air attack. So hang on to your hats. Basically, the air unit is still in the vicinity after this attack is over, and it might be calling in escorts. So keep in mind this roll for an additional round of combat on the encounter chart, and that is not good news. So let's resolve the hits first. So again, back to the combat display mat, we've got 3 incoming hits. We're going to have to go ahead and resolve those now. So let's look at the damage chart. So what we're going to do now is we're on the E4 table, U-boat damage chart table, and we have to roll 3 times. So let me just sort of zoom in there for you. And what we're going to do is we're going to roll 2 6-sider dies, but the results are 11 through 66, so we need 1 colored die for the tens place and 1 colored die for the ones place. So we'll use black dies as the tens place. So we're going to have to roll 3 times. So let's roll for the first damage result. I rolled a 61. So 61 is hydrophones. Okay, so for hydrophones, I'm going to go ahead and have to get a damage marker for that. And I will pause this video clip while I go grab it. Okay, we magically have gathered our damage hydrophone damage marker for the U-boat. So let me just show you how that would get placed. So just to zoom in here quite a bit so you can see it. We also have generic damage markers. You don't have to have the one that says hydrophones on it. I just recommend this so in case your table gets disrupted or markers get pushed, if you don't have any label on the marker, it might be hard to remember where it was. So we've got to mark our damaged hydrophones as having just occurred on our U-boat display mat. And that is what you now see here. All right, so we still have two incoming hits that we have to deal with here. So I moved up the incoming hits marker to the 2 spot, and we now have to roll to see what happens with the next hit. And I rolled 62. 62 is aft. Oh no, aft torpedo door has been damaged. So just jumping forward again, I went ahead and grabbed that marker, and in the aft torpedo tube area, I'm just going to place this basically on top of whatever we have here. So we've got a damaged aft torpedo door. Hopefully we can get that fixed. We'll find out soon. All right, we've still got one more incoming hit to roll for, so let's go ahead and resolve that. And I rolled 63. Crew injury times 2. Oh boy. Even more fun now. So actually what I can do is I'm going to actually combine this with the other crew injury that occurred originally. So if you recall, it says here I've got to add 1 crew injury to whatever the result is, and I just rolled for 2 crew injury. So I've got to roll 3 times now to determine the crew injury. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to the damage, U-boat damage and repair chart, E5, and here's the crew injury table. So I'm going to have to roll here 3 times. Not good news. And again, I'm rolling 2d6, and let's see what happens. 3 times. I rolled a 10, so the second officer, I don't know how much, how injured he is, so now we have to roll to see the result for the injury. Roll 1d6. I rolled a 4. Oh, a severe wound. Not good. So with the second officer taking a severe wound, we're going to have to go ahead and show that on our U-boat display. And I've actually grabbed the severe wound marker, and we placed that on the crew status for our second officer. Things are not looking pretty here, folks, but we're not done. So we have to return now and resolve the other 2 crew injuries. So let's roll again. I rolled a 6. That's a generic crew. And let's see what happened to our generic crew. A 6. Oh, killed in action. One of our generic crews just went bye-bye. They were killed. So to show that, we're going to go over to our display, and I've got the killed in action marker, and it goes over one of our generic crew spaces, so we're going to have to place that. And now we go back to resolve our last, and this third crew hit was again because it was called for just from the original hit that from the aircraft, so that's the third one. And I rolled a 4, which is the engineer. Okay, the engineer, what happened to our engineer? A 4, another severe wound result. So for our engineer, we're going to have to go ahead and show that he has also been severely wounded. So we put that in that crew space. And we have now completed the damage that has occurred. So we took, quite a bit of damage. Our hydrophones are damaged. Our aft torpedo door is damaged. Some of our crew was killed in action. And our second officer, watch officer, and our engineer were severely wounded by this air encounter. We're still not out of the woods, though, however, since we had a missed result when we rolled back on this chart here for that 1 attack. And we did that extra crew injury. We just did that. And you notice here for the flak attack on a miss, it means you have to roll for additional round of combat to see if any escorts arrive. So that's what we have to do next. So let's go ahead and see what happens there. So the way we do that is, since the aircraft might be calling in some some escorts, we're going to roll on the additional round of combat table. And let me just make sure there are no modifiers because it's 1940. So we'll go ahead and roll 2d6. I rolled 12. Okay, now that would be a random event result if it was my first roll for an encounter check for that travel box. But that is not what I just did. This was not the first roll we just did for entering that travel box. It was something that occurred due to an additional round of combat. So by the rules, that does not trigger um, a random event because it did not happen during the normal course of just entering a travel box. So basically, there is no additional round of combat occurring, meaning no escort arrived on the scene. If an escort did arrive on the scene, that would basically mean is we would have to then go here to the escort detection chart. We would roll on this table, but we would have to add a previously detected +1 to the die roll, which would make it a little bit more difficult for us to escape detection. And that is actually noted on the air attack table. So if I go back to that, for example here, you'll notice if we miss the aircraft, when you roll for additional combat, if escorts do arrive, which they didn't, but if escorts would have arrived on the scene, they would have got that +1 previously detected die roll modifier on that E2 chart that we were just looking at here. But it didn't happen, so basically what that means, end of the day, is we took all this damage, but the encounter is now officially over, and we would move on to the next travel box. However, before we move on to the next travel box, we have to conduct repairs for what we can. And what we can do is we can conduct repairs and roll for that now for our damaged aft torpedo door and our damaged hydrophone. So we're going to go ahead and roll for that now. So let's go to that chart. We're going to roll for the aft door first. So let me go here, and you see torpedo aft doors. If they're jammed, we're going to see now if we can fix it, because the encounters, basically all the combat rounds that can possibly occur are now over, because that additional round of combat did not trigger any escorts to arrive on the scene, nor did any aircraft encounter occur again. So we basically finished the entire encounter, but we still, as soon as you finish an encounter and wrap it up, and there's no more combat rounds that can happen, basically, you now roll to fix whatever has become damaged on your U-boat. One small exception just to be aware of, if I was engaging a convoy or any ships under escort, there's what's called the following rule. And following is only allowed against escorted ships, basically. What would happen is before you roll for the following, if that's what you want to do, you would actually go through this repair phase at that point in time. So basically repairs occur if it's just from a straight air attack, just when it's all done, all is said and done, you do that before you move on to the next travel box. Or if you were in an engagement against escorted ships, what you would do is it's either at the end of the engagement after all the combat rounds have been finished, but you have to finish all of them. You know, it could have been multiple depth charge attacks, for example. It took you a while to get away from the escort, so you would finish multiple rounds of depth charge attack, which can be just like a never-ending loop until you finally can escape detection. Once all possible combat is over and done with, which means you're either going to move on to the next travel box, or you're going to attempt to do a following action, you then have to go conduct repairs. So we're going to do that now for the aft torpedo door. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, if I had a engineer that was an experte rating, I would get to apply a -1 modifier, as you can see here at the bottom right, just to zoom in. But I do not have a expert engineer, so we're just going to have to roll straight up on this chart. So let's go ahead and roll a 1d6 and see what happens. I rolled a 6. Torpedo aft door is inoperable. That is bad news. Very bad news. That means we will not be able to fire any of our torpedoes from the aft torpedo tubes for the rest of the patrol assignment. That is the end result of that. Now let's go see if we can fix our hydrophones. So we're going to go ahead and attempt that now. So we're going to go ahead and roll now a 1d6. And I rolled a 6 again. Not good. Oh, not good at all. So I have to now switch over to inoperable. So what this means is, okay, we've done. We tried to fix what we could. We had absolutely no luck. So what's going to happen now is we're going to advance to our next travel space because we finished that encounter with the air encounter. It's all done. But notice now we're going to have to deal with the consequences for the rest of this patrol until we finish it. We've got aft doors that are now shut on us, and the hydrophones are inoperable. So just be aware what the effect of the hydrophone is, and that is, well, you can't take evasive action, which basically means it's tougher to get away. So anytime you're undergoing an escort air attack in the future, on that E3 table, there's a +1 modifier, and we can actually see that +1 modifier right here. Hydrophones out, E3 chart, +1 on the die roll. Increases your number of hits because it's just tougher for your evasive maneuvers. So this is an example of how a potential air encounter would occur in the game. I do want to mention also, though, that there is, if you roll 1 or less, what would happen in that case is, well, we have a simultaneous result here. In other words, you do the aircraft encounter and you do the flak attack sort of at the same time. So this damage, any damage here has to get parsed out, but then you have to apply this as well, and that's covered in the rules. But here you would have potential. There is the potential for a second attack, and whether that happens or not really depends how successful your flak attack was. If you shoot down if you roll and shoot down the aircraft, that means the aircraft encounter ends and the second air attack is ignored. So if you had rolled 1 or less, but you shot down the aircraft, that's good news for you because that aircraft encounter is only going to get to do that 1 attack, but not the second attack. That was just canceled out because you shot it down. If you damage here, if you damage the aircraft and you had rolled a 1 or less, as you can see here from the result, you still have to resolve the second air attack. It would still have to happen. But no matter what, once that second attack happens, you automatically end the entire encounter for that travel box. You would not be rolling again, and this is important. You are not rolling again on the additional turn on the encounter chart here. You're not rolling for additional round of combat like we did in our example. If you damage that air, it's considered, okay, you've shaken it off and there's just not going to be any opportunity. They're going to be busy with the damage, dealing with that. They're not going to be calling in escorts to arrive in time. So you will perhaps undergo a second air attack. You still have to deal with that for sure if you rolled 1 or less, but you are guaranteed that the encounter will end and you will just move to the next travel box. So again, I hope this has given you basically a good overview of how aircraft encounters work. Again, it's fully covered in the rules, and again, we hope that you found this helpful.